Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Overcoming Trauma video series that is brought to you by Recover Alaska. Today, we are speaking with Jennifer Christensen, and she is so brave and courageous to share her story with us today. The result of her extreme trauma in childhood led her to extreme people-pleasing and compulsive lying, which caused a lot of problems in her life. And she shares how she overcame that struggle, and she is living such a beautiful, magnificent life today. So please come to this with an open heart and an open mind. And thank you again, Jennifer, for sharing this. Hello and welcome. Today I am here with Jennifer, and she is here. She works for Beacon Media, not works for, owns, creator. We'll hear all of the owners. Yeah. Amazing company. And I'm just so glad to have you here today. I don't know you very well. I know bits and pieces of your story, and I know that you are very courageous for sharing it with us today. So this whole series is around overcoming adversity, overcoming trauma, stepping into responsibility, sharing where we've been and how far we've come, and the healing that's gone on in our lives as Alaskans and humans and women. And I'm just really grateful that you're here today to share with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to let you take it away and just give us some background on where you've been and the journey to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just I have a huge love of Alaska, but my first experience coming to Alaska was definitely challenging. So I grew up in a Midwest town called Novi outside of Detroit, and both my parents teachers, very middle-class upbringing. I was just a really proud tomboy, and my favorite thing was school. And my parents wanted to have an adventure. So we moved to Alaska. I think partially they wanted to get away from kind of the whole construct culture of Midwest as well. And kind of, there's the whole parent thing there, a generational thing with grandparents and stuff. So that was hard for me when we first decided to move here, because I was really close to a lot of grandparents and family, but I saw it as an adventure too. And within a year of coming to Alaska, I think I didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back on it, I was a pretty naive kid. And again, tomboy, into sports, all of that. And I loved school, was like my favorite thing, learning. And I got involved with some boys in the neighborhood, thought they were my friends. And after just a short time, when we moved into this neighborhood, I was sexually assaulted by multiple of them the same day. And it just, I don't know any other way to describe it than it just totally shattered my soul. I really didn't have any context for that. And, I just didn't have any context that kind of thing even existed, I guess, in the world. So I think from that naive perspective. So I'm not sure even today. I've, prayed about it, and I've really thought about it a lot of why I didn't tell my parents what happened. I think I just had so much shame and really felt like it was my fault. And I thought these people were my friends, and, I invited them over, and I was alone a lot. Like, my parents worked a lot, so I was alone a lot in the afternoons. And maybe that was already like something that I struggled with. It's hard for me to remember, but maybe I already struggled. I know that I struggled with wanting to please people, including my parents, and that definitely wouldn't have pleased them, right? So I don't think they would have blamed me at all. I know they wouldn't have. They love me very much, but it really set me on this whole different trajectory in life. And honestly, I don't think even just the sexual assault itself, but it was the not the secret, like not sharing it. And later, when I got therapy, my counselor said that basically, like, my personality kind of split at that point. I just, again, didn't know how to process that. And that does seem about right, because things, again, like I said, went a different direction. So I started not doing as well in school. My parents had no idea what was wrong with me. They thought I was using drugs or something. So my mom actually moved me to her school where she was a junior high teacher, and that was not fun. And then by ninth grade, I mean, they were just kind of, I was just acting very rebellious and, angry and acting out and lying. Lying was really like coming up a lot, and they just didn't know what to do with me. So they were going to send me to a boarding school, but a really good teacher convinced them to give me the opportunity to go to Stellar. And Stellar was kind of this amazing reprieve for me, 9th through 12th grade. My grades came back up again. It was really interesting because it was a lot of kids that were really, really intelligent, but they tended to be kids who like didn't really fit in or were like a little bit more broken, but they were more open about it. And I just felt like I could kind of be more myself. So it's not like I admitted necessarily what had happened or anything, but I guess it was just a place I felt like I could just be broken and it was okay. There's such value in that and having an environment like that. And especially for somebody who was a pleaser like me, it was very different. I mean, I didn't even realize at the time how healing that was. I had some really impactful teachers and good friends, and it just became less about how I looked or appeared or any of that, and more about just learning and good friendships. So I'm still friends with some of those people today, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Yeah. So from there I left to college, and just so it makes me just sad right now, just being back in college now, 35 years later. It's crazy. But I just couldn't hack it. And it wasn't the work and it wasn't any of that, but just emotionally, I just started falling apart. And like things were coming to the surface and I just couldn't hack it. So after a semester, I came back home, I got my own apartment and just trying to find some semblance of life, I guess. But it was really depressing. Like I said, when I was younger, I had that dream of like Ivy League and certain things, and that brokenness really just emotionally, I was just not together. I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't like I did anything wrong there, but I was just very sad a lot. So I think looking back on it, actually, I think I had like the emotional capacity of a 11-year-old trying to go to college, right? Like that's kind of where my emotional development stopped. So anyway, I came back and got into design, and I found like kind of a job I really liked, and actually met my husband, who I still can't even believe I met him when I was 19, but fell in love. And the best way I can describe my husband and my relationship, this has been 28 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, well, 30 years like from when we met, but we were both very, very broken people. But somehow, and I think it's because we had like that split personality thing, we were able to just really be loving with each other. Like we were never mean to each other ever. And so I'm not saying it wasn't dysfunctional, because it really was. Like one of the most dysfunctional parts of our relationship was we both knew we had these areas that like we couldn't talk about. He knew I had a lying issue. I knew he had a issue of just not kind of saying what he really thought and showing his emotions and things. Not emotionally available, I guess. But it was almost like, okay, well, we won't call each other on our stuff and we'll just like have a relationship over here, right? Which that never works for long. But man, we tried. Yeah, but I love him so much. Like we have such a different relationship today. It's just by the grace of God that we made it through those first 10 years. So,
wow.
So on the outside, my life looked amazing. I ended up getting married at 21. I had this beautiful house. I had a beautiful car. I had, I was making really good money where I worked. My husband was making good money. Like all the like exterior stuff just looked amazing. And, but inside it was just still an absolute disaster. So, I would just act out in like really weird ways. I was terrible with money, and I was just overspending, and, irrational decisions that just didn't, it wasn't like, again, like, wasn't like that drug addiction side, but I would just make up lies about stuff that didn't make any sense. Like, why was I even doing that? Right? Total lack of self-awareness. And I would go through like relationship after relationship because friends were just like, just be yourself, or just, but I just really couldn't. So anyway, so that progressed, and we were married for about 4 years. We started having kids. I have 3 amazing kids. And then I started a business, and really not out of any sort of like excellent forethought or anything. I was just really, really good at marketing and sales. So I started this business, travel business, and it just took off. It like just really, really took off very quickly. And that became like this whole thing of like my identity of like, wow, I've really, all those lies about myself of thinking that I'm not worthy and I'm like dirty and shameful and all those things, I kind of like threw into this identity of this successful businesswoman type thing. And it sort of filled that niche of me feeling like I never really did the college thing. So for quite a while that did really well, and it grew and grew and sort of took over my life. I was quite a workaholic. I pretty much would work, like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., come home, be with the kids and my husband for like 3 hours, work at night. I mean, it was ridiculous. Wow. But that was just my life, became just like the work and home. And eventually after 2001, after 9/11, started having some serious issues with the business, and that lack of character that I had been like this thing all these years really came to the surface. And instead of me just facing things head on, I continued to lie. And within about 1.5 years, like the whole thing fell apart. People didn't want to do business with me anymore. Everything came to the surface. And I was stuck with basically, committing a crime and having serious consequences from that and hurting a lot of people.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
That was horrible. And so that was, everybody has a rock bottom. I wish that my rock bottom did not involve other people. Like so much wish that, like my whole life I've wished that, but it did. And I just remember a couple weeks of just weeks, maybe months. I ended up going to, identified, okay, something's really wrong with me. So I started with a counselor and just started taking inventory on my whole life. And it was awful. I mean, it was like, I could not remember. And I remember like really going, who am I and what do I have to feel good about? And I realized that so much of my life was now a lie. Like there was nothing. Like there was, yes, I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I'm these things. And like, yes, I love my family, but look at my behavior, right? And so that the inventory piece was massive. It was finally just a total and complete reckoning of everything I had pretended to be that I wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was that section of my life, and it was pretty horrible. So we sold everything we had, tried to make amends best I could. By a total miracle of God, my husband really felt that he was supposed to forgive me. He had no idea what was going on. And so he did. And we walked through just a totally different life together. We walked through starting to live out some of those consequences. Like I said, selling everything we owned and paying people back and just trying to make amends best we could. I shouldn't say we, because it was my actions, but we both suffered the consequences of that, right?
Yeah.
And just, yeah, so waiting for the ultimate consequences of that to hit, and then walking through that, and then trying to rebuild some sort of life, and recognizing that I had to build life from the very bottom.
Mm.
So my story, I know this isn't everybody's story, but my story involved a pretty intense and compelling conversion experience with Christianity. And I think the core piece of that, when I really go back to it, and just because I want to honor everybody and where they're at in that journey, and I know unfortunately that term of Christianity can have a negative expression for other people, it was about me submitting to something bigger than myself. It was about me acknowledging there's something bigger than me. There's something that it's not all about me, right? This world is not all about me. And that I have value as a human being, and other people have value as a human being, not just by what they do, but just because we're human beings. And we're loved. And so that core piece was something that I had been missing for a long time. So from that, it was a very long road, I would say, of recovery. A lot of things in my life changed immediately. And there were certain things I did to make sure that none of those behaviors could cause that level of harm again. Yeah, you have a question about that? Sure.
Yeah, let's pause for a minute before we move into this next big phase, which is going to be the new you, the real you, I'd say. So I just want to talk for a minute about some of the things you've mentioned. What I'm hearing a lot of is shame, which I feel like is one of the most challenging emotions to move through. Because again, we want to hide it. The feeling of it, I feel like it causes like sickness in our bodies. I mean, it's just such an awful feeling. And there's so often it turns into a cycle of shame. And, stemming from that original situation you had as a child, and then even to what happened so many years later, and, harming other people. And that I'm sure that, the shame that comes from that. And, I've experienced that in my bad times. I wasn't thinking of anyone else. I wasn't thinking of myself. I was just somewhere else completely. And when you get back into who you truly are, and then you're like, oh my God, it's really, really painful. Because it's not only the pain from one person you may have harmed, it's all the people and yourself and all whatever you've been suppressing. And so I definitely commend you on just taking the steps, trying to make amends, trying to be there for yourself. I think finding that love and forgiveness for ourselves can be really, really challenging in those kind of situations. So, I think that's so amazing. And I'm wondering, you're talking a lot about lying, and I think most of us have, whether we've been someone who's had periods of lying a lot or witnessed that in friends or family. What was going on in your mind during those times? When you knew you were lying, or did you know, or were you rationalizing? Like, what was happening inside of you? I'm just super curious.
Yeah, it's a super good question. There was kind of like two different levels, I would say. So there was the stuff that would just happen, I would say, literally like trigger response, like automatically. It was such a habit. I mean, sometimes I would just even lie about what I had for lunch. It was ridiculous. Like, they had no bearing on anything. It was just like, this is just who I am, right? And so that was just, it was automatic. So it was this piece that was just operating like such a habit. It was automatic. This other piece, I would know about it. And this is just going to sound so weird, but even if I knew I was going to get found out, like, I would still stay in it, because the pain of not staying in it felt like I was going to die. Like, and I'm sure not everybody has the same experience on this one, right? But I think for me, it was, and I've met other people like this too. It's almost like once you unravel it, where's it going to end? Right. So once people saw behind the scene, where is it going to end? Because I was like, my exterior and my interior were so far apart.
Oh,
Right. So like once like you didn't believe my exterior anymore and you got beneath the scene, it was going to be really painful and ugly. And then I was really going to get hurt because you were going to see me and you were going to reject me.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just really felt like worthless isn't quite the right word. Just, I don't know, just like not even like a person. Like I just was such a failure as a human being.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really sad. How long was it before you ever told someone about what happened to you when you were 11?
So the interesting thing was about a year before everything kind of came crashing down in my like rock bottom, right? Um, I had been doing like some acupuncture because I was getting like so many physical problems, like you said, right? All those emotional things start to cause fit. Here I was like only 30, and like my body is like starting to just like really exhibit massive physical problems. So I started doing like acupuncture and like, you know, some deep massage and chiropractic and stuff. And during this one acupuncture session, like the entire experience of what happened came back so full force in my mind and my heart that I just started sobbing. And my husband was there out in the waiting room. And so I went out and I like, just, you know, let it all out with him that this had happened.
So this was like what, 20 years later or something?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you were just holding on to that for
Yeah.
way too long. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was like different things, like the first boy that I was with consensually, it was my high school sweetheart. And I think I was like 17. We'd been dating for like 2 years. And he made, because I told him I was, you know, a virgin, which technically I thought I was, right? Like in the sense of like not by choice. So he made some comment about, well, I don't think you really are, you know, because
Ugh.
I didn't bleed or whatever. And so there was like various like trigger things that happened along the way, but they were never enough that I couldn't just like shove it back down. And it wasn't until that experience about a year before everything came crashing down. And I just wish at that point I had gotten like serious help so badly. Like that's my encouragement to people. Like when you are ready to deal with this, like it can go one of two ways. You can either willingly get help or it's going to come to you in not a good way. And I so wish I had done that. I just didn't even know what to do with it. It would just kind of exploded everywhere. So, and then I tried to like shove it back in, but it wouldn't go back in. Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Okay. I mean, thank you for sharing that. And, and I also had a similar experience where that's how I, technically lost my virginity was not consensually. And the things that happened to my brain, which I'm sure is similar to what happened in your brain, of just my belief in right and wrong, good and bad, humans, safety, the world, like everything shattered
yeah.
in just this moment. And it's probably 1 hour of a day, and it's amazing what happens internally with PTSD and trauma. And I completely understand, especially at your age. I was older, I was a teenager, you were 11. I mean, I can't actually imagine that because you're still developing. And so I can totally understand, though, the idea of the splitting of like, how are we going to survive now? How are we going to show up in the world now? What do we do with this? And that's why my hope is always for people to share, even just with one person. It doesn't need to be the cops. It doesn't need to be,
Right.
it doesn't need to be your mom or dad, but one person you can find to trust and be able to share these things, because when we hold this stuff in,
It's
it
like
will
poison.
come out some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine just, it's just so hard, Blaze, to like for the last 19 years, I really haven't shared a lot about the assault part and all of that leading up to that part of my life, because I don't want anyone to ever think like I'm not responsible for my own behavior, right? Like a big part of me getting healing was taking responsibility for my hurt of other people. And then, like you said, I really had to take responsibility. Like, it's not my fault what happened, but I
Right.
had to take responsibility for my own healing too. And so it's that I've always felt very like, just really want to be careful to honor people, because I just don't want anyone to ever think I'm saying it's an excuse, right? Because one thing is not an excuse for another.
Right.
But in the context of what we're talking about, like if we're just talking about the trauma piece, I 100% agree with you. Like that is just, I believe the reality, if it's not dealt with, it's going to come out one way or another, and not a good way.
Yeah. And I appreciate your integrity today with saying I'm responsible for all the harm I've caused, and I feel the same way. But those two things can exist together. I mean, one does not negate the other. There's still a part of you that went through this traumatic thing that you did not deserve and was not okay. And then there's another thing you did where they're not the same thing. And
Yeah, that's fair.
we all have a past, and I definitely feel that things that happen to children, it's never your fault. I mean, adults too, are talking about sexual assault, but like in general with abuse and all these different things, there's nothing you did at 11 years old to cause that.
No,
And
100%. I
and the
know
thing
that
you
now.
did, yeah, and the things you've done as an adult, yeah, we all have to take responsibility for that. And I love that you're like, I'm not a victim, I'm going to stand up, I know my part in this, and that's awesome. But you still have your own story too, so
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah. So okay, let's move back into you're talking about Christianity and finding this, higher, what's the word I'm looking for?
I'd say higher purpose, and not just higher purpose, but just really, there's something that was so missing in me. And, I don't want to dishonor my parents in any way, but I just did not really feel, for whatever reason, that I was loved for me. And I don't know that you can fully love other people well until you understand that you're loved too, right? And however you get to that point, again, that's not what I want to talk about, because I want to honor everybody's journey. But for me, it was just truly understanding the value, not in performance or not in looks or not in, what I can do for somebody else, right? Because weirdly, that's kind of how my mind went with that whole sexual thing, is what I was doing for somebody else was more important than my own value as a person. And that reinforced that whole pleasing thing of like, even if it meant my soul was literally dying, I would do things for other people.
Yeah.
So that broke that for me, of just feeling like, wow, okay, there is a God, there's a creator in this universe. I am loved because I'm human, and other people are loved because they're human, and we have grace for each other. And we are not supposed to do things. If I truly am loved, then me doing stuff that harms my soul is not okay, right? Like when you really know that about yourself, doing things that are either self-sabotaging or allowing somebody else to do it for you is not okay. So that was a huge shift in my thinking. I never even really thought that way before. So my husband had kind of a similar experience with me. We both, started going down this different journey. I believe was able to do the best that we possibly could in teaching our children how much they were loved for who they are, and they didn't have to be any particular way except just who they are. And they are all radically different people. One's super type A and she's at Cornell Law School, and one's super earthy and she's, a cook, and my son's, I don't know, he's amazing. So they're all amazing, but
Yeah.
but it was just that birth of just be yourself, right? Be loved for who you are. So but yeah, so as far as the world went, I was this newfound identity of knowing kind of who I was, and then doing really heavy work on myself, heavy therapy, healing, making amends, showing up wherever I could to just be transparent with people, and then also helping other people with their own walk. It was kind of like AA, but without the AA, because there's not like AA for lying or, but I had like amazing people, and I know a lot of people don't have this experience, but I actually had amazing like mentors and people in our church that just like came around me and, I don't know, showed me how to live a different way. Showed me what it was like to put others first in the right way, right? To put them first in, not in a way that's like they're more important than me, but just to recognize it's not all about me.
Sure.
So I had so many good things like that along the way. I think the hardest part of the journey has been, just not feeling like I deserve to ever have any true kind of quote unquote success in the world again. So, I would have been, I really truly was at a place, if I delivered pizzas for the rest of my life, I would have been fine. Truly. I was not looking for anything else. Because I just wanted to be a good human being. But, that's not the path I believe God had for me. And so, I did work more professionally for quite a few years. And then when I met Adrienne, my business partner, I told her all the reasons that she absolutely would not want to be in business with me. And
Wow.
yeah, and she's like, no, I totally do. And so, we couldn't for a couple of years, but we kind of got to know each other first. And she's actually been a really big part of my healing, of somebody that I can just be totally honest with. And we've walked through this business together. And I believe there's redemption in that too, just in not being perfect by any means, but something that had been very negative before being very positive now. I do want to say, I think it's critical, whatever your issue is in life, like putting up those safeguards and barriers. So like one of the things I told her in the beginning is, if and when we do ever, do this business thing together, like I will never have any part of the money ever. Because like that's a boundary. I don't care how confident or comfortable I feel with myself. I'm never going to allow anyone else to have to worry about that. Right. Like it's just, so that's just, and she was great with that. She's like, oh yeah, like I love that part. And I'm like, well, I hate that part anyway. So great. so let's not do that. So there's certain, like, and there's actually a scripture that says better to enter the kingdom of heaven without one arm than to have it drag you down. There's like and if you think about that kind of in life, it's like, do I restrict myself here because it just makes my life better? Right. To me, that's like freedom, because then I can feel free without having to worry about that. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think boundaries are, when we have strong boundaries that make sense, it is very freeing. It allows us to express ourselves in the way that we're meant to.
Honoring myself, honoring other people, doing that well. So the last, I'd say 4 to 5 years have been so amazing. I definitely struggled along the journey. I'd have times where I would revert back to lying. Oh, just sucked so much. It wasn't like my everyday behavior anymore at all. But like something would trigger me and this automatic thing would come out. I'm like, oh my God, and I have to go back and explain. Oh, it's just horrible. But there's been such freedom.
What would you do in those moments? Because I was going to ask you about that, because I think for all of us, whatever a thing was, we revert back sometimes. And how would you deal with that? Did you have any tools or tricks? I mean, it sounds like you were at least able to witness it in a new way. Yeah.
So my advice on this might sound a little weird, but it's been true for me. I didn't necessarily set myself up by having I had some toxic relationships, right? And so part of it for me was honestly just making sure I set good boundaries and remove those people from my life and had the people in my life who I could truly be myself with. I'm not even blaming anybody else for anything, but there's certain personalities that are kind of a bully personality. that just trigger the heck out of me. Like when somebody's like that bully personality where they like really push on you and they're trying to get you to do something you don't want to do, that's where my line would just like kick in, right? So removal of that was really big. I mean, I'm just being honest, like that's a hard one. I mean, when I look at the last 4 to 5 years, like that's been the biggest game changer. And then having somebody safe that when it happens, like an immediate plan, you know, being able to go in and like talk to my therapist, talk to Adrian, talk to my husband and say, wow, something must be off in my life because why am I doing this? And so it all to me comes down to, do you have those safe places? Because that's where the healing comes. And then I could look at it and go, oh, okay, I overextended myself here. I overpromised. I didn't know how to say no. Okay, I need to own that, you know, not do that again, learn that lesson, and not put myself in that position, because that's where my weaknesses are. So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, just safe people, a safe place. I think it can be a therapist, but you cannot, I think the key is you cannot let that stay a secret.
Right.
Like you don't necessarily have to go back to that person, like if they're not a safe person to talk to about it, unless you need to make amends, right? Or whatever you need to do. But you've got to get that out. To me, it's like anything I keep secrets like poison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been, but I don't know if it's because I've just set so many more strict boundaries, but again, the last 4 to 5 years have just been amazing. I feel like I'm like in some ways like redeeming who I was at 11. So
Wow. Have you ever done any like inner child work or inner child meditation, something? Okay.
yeah,
I bet that would be super powerful for you.
it was.
Yeah.
It was really good. I'm back at school and I chose Harvard, and I know that was like crazy hard with this work that I do, but it's been so healing.
Wow. That's incredible.
Like, it's been awesome. It's been really, really, really challenging, but after not being an academic for all that time, but it was like, no, I can do this. Like I can, even if it takes me another 4 years, 5 years, it's fine. But I know that was part of who I was supposed to be, not necessarily Harvard. Like, I don't know that part matters so much, but like that level of educating and challenging myself was always my goal.
Yeah.
And so that didn't happen, and now it's happening now. And so it's really, really grateful.
That's really beautiful. And I'm sure too, that's part of that self-healing and, you know, rebuilding and who you really truly are, and, you know, honoring that part of yourself too. And I also love that you and your husband have been together through all of this. You know, a lot of us have ups and downs in relationships, but I think the ones that seem to stick it out are the ones that are able to grow at a similar rate or change in similar ways. You know, when that doesn't happen, it's very hard to still be a good match. But you both must have been willing to, or just naturally able to grow together. So that's amazing.
So I believe if anyone's the hero of our story, it's definitely him, because like the choice for me to get healing was like death or get healing, right? And the choice for him, like he totally could have just walked away, been like, you're a mess, I'm not gonna deal with my stuff, you know, but I mean, because clearly I was the bigger, more obvious mess, right? But he had a lot of stuff he had to deal with, and he chose to, you know, basically go on that journey with me and walk through a lot of stuff from his past. You know, his stuff just looked different than mine. And our marriage now is like so much better. I mean, it's been better for a long time, but I mean, it just keeps getting better because there's nothing between us, right? And we have goals and aspirations and, you know, things that we do together. So it's good.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, this is all, it's just a really important story, an important view, perspective to be sharing. You're not the only one that's gone through what you've gone through. You're not the only one who has expressed in the way you did throughout your life, and seeing how much you have kept going forward to change and to, I think the biggest kind of amends are the living amends. And that's what you're doing today, not only for yourself, but also for other people, by being in a business with high integrity, by having those boundaries, by going to school, you know, just all being a good mom and partner, and everything you're doing. I just think it's really, really incredible. And I know how hard it is to dip down really low and have to climb our way back up and show our face again and deal with people not believing in us and not liking us, understanding us. You know, that's going to happen. And getting to a place where, especially as people pleasers, where we can be like, okay, not everyone has to like us. Okay, yeah, I can handle that, you know. And
People are not always going to like me. Nope.
no, and no matter what. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's not why we're here. We're not here for everyone to like us. You know,
Yeah.
you're going to resonate with a certain group of people, and those are your people, and that's really important, and you're here to give them hope, and I think that's beautiful. So before we wrap up, so
Yeah.
you've talked about I want to talk about the healing tools. So we've got mentors,
Yeah.
your faith, accountability,
Yeah.
boundaries, also removing triggers, and that's huge. And I think that across the board, even for people dealing with alcoholism or addiction, it's huge. I had to stop hanging out with drinking buddies. You know, I had to stop. I had to shift a lot of people in my life. And
I don't think I think somehow we make that seem like that's not okay anymore. And I understand, like, nobody wants to feel like they're hemmed in or anything, but there is freedom and just being able to grow without constantly having your system or your body, because your pathways are used to reacting in a certain way.
yeah,
Right. And to heal that, I think you have to have a break sometimes.
absolutely. And our brains are so amazing. They will rewire into a new pathway, but we have to give them the opportunity. Yeah. And so you talked about therapy. I think therapy is amazing, and just having a strong support like your husband and your business partner and friendships. So before we wrap up, are there any other tools, any other parts of this? Like, what would you say to someone listening right now who is you a few steps back, maybe where you were when you were still hiding this big secret and just trying so hard to power through? What message would you have for that person?
Oh gosh, wish I could like talk to myself back then before it all blew up. So just take one step, find one person that you can talk to. And if you are powering through in anything, if you know you're powering through in anything in your life, you're covering something, you're not dealing with something. And that's not to make you feel bad. That's not like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Like, you're doing the best you can. But that one step towards talking to somebody can lead to freedom. And it's worth it. The other side is worth it. Like, I never thought my life could be this amazing. Ever.
That's incredible. And I second that. The rewards, like the healing is painful, but the rewards come fast, and they're just usually beyond what we've imagined for ourselves. So
right. So, and just that whatever you're hiding, like, it's okay. There's lots of stuff that lots of people have been through, and you are not alone in that, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I really, really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thanks.